Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Sketchwave, our weekly show where we talk all things digital art, mainly around Procreate, because we are both Procreate artists here on YouTube. My name is Joel, otherwise known as JoelCreate, and my co-host, as always, is the one and only James Julier. James, how has your week been? Last time we spoke, you were away in London.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting back on with some of the work that I've been working on previously. So final day of the mural that I was working on. So yeah, there's a finished image of it now that, yeah, I'm satisfied with it. You know, I think with all murals, they're so massive that you end up treating them slightly differently than you would do on a canvas. You can't fine tune it to death, you know. You need to be kind of away from the premises after a certain point. They kind of close the doors and turn the lights off when you need to leave. And, you know, there's always a limit in terms of like the commission charge that you've put forward. And then you can think, well, I can only really justify X amount of days. So I'm happy with it. It could be a little bit more fiddled with, but, you know, fundamentally it doesn't need it. So I'm quite happy with the outcome of that. So that's good to get that one behind me. And then otherwise, a little bit of drama this week. My caravan because we've got like a touring caravan we take the kids around in, it nearly got burnt down. There was a big incident in the north of England near Oldham. Like 30 caravans were damaged in a big blaze, so quite a dramatic scene there. So we're very lucky to have escaped any damage whatsoever, not even a smell of smoke inside the caravan. So we were very lucky to avoid all of that.
The photo you sent of the photo you sent though was absolutely nuts, like the blaze of it. But going back to the mural before we move on, it's actually been so fun, hasn't it, just to see the weekly progression of the mural and all the details that you've added, flushing out the full colours. You didn't go with a set of like a black background, did you? Does that look like a slightly dark green to me?
Yeah, I went to the kind of DIY store B&Q in the UK and got a particular green off the colour chart that, you know, was very, very dark. So it gave that overall kind of almost black look, but it's got a richness to it, just a bit of life there. Kind of, I think it was called Forest something. Yeah, so quite suitably for the subject matter, yeah.
It looks great against the pink flowers as well. They look awesome. The ones near the left-hand side of the door, really cool. And again, like we've mentioned in the previous episode, keeping the certain elements in black and white just gives it a whole extra dimension. That kind of, it almost gives the impression that it's maybe not finished, but because of where it sits in like an art, wing of the school or whatever you want to refer to it as, it kind of looks like it's like that. It shows all the stages of it in progress styles, to. Exactly, to the finished article. It looks awesome.
Thank you.
Again, so fun to watch it week in, week out.
Thank you very much. Has your week been a busy one?
Well, as eagle-eyed viewers might be able to see, I'm not in my normal room. And that's because me and Mrs. Create have moved into our first home together. And
Congratulations.
It's thank you. It's been awesome. I've really enjoyed it. It's been bloody hard work, though. We had a friend help us with moving. Who has a removal company, but because we were using her rather than just actually sort of paying for her to do it, if that makes sense, there was no extra employees come along to help you take all the boxes. It's you and me, and that's it. So I lifted a sofa and it smacked me right in the mouth, and I've got a big fat lip. And then I've been licking my lips, so that's why they look like I've got lipstick on. So
we're delayed by a day, aren't we, in terms of recording, because
we are
the swelling to go down.
And then we've delayed it a day, and I don't know if we can still hear them or if they will appear. They practice doing the church bells over the roads on a Wednesday at this time. So I was thinking, like, oh, what time do we have to postpone this to? Do we have to postpone it another day? But the whole move's been great, and I'm really in my element at the minute. But I haven't touched Procreate. This is the longest I haven't touched Procreate in. Other than going on holiday, of course.
Yeah.
Like, just about a week now, if not more. Probably coming up to 2 weeks. And I feel so disconnected from it. But I'm eager to get onto it tomorrow because I need to record a tutorial for next week.
But that's why you fill them in advance. So you've got them in the can, ready to go.
Exactly. Exactly. I don't have to make any Patreon tutorials. They're already done. And anyway, talking about tutorials, let's take a look at what we released last week, because of course we do this already. Every single week is a segment of the show. if you're watching and you've obviously seen the title in reference to the Procreate CEO, I'm going to leave timestamps below where you can jump ahead if you want to the actual Procreate story. We're going to break down our tutorials like we do every single week, so you can join us for that part if you want. Otherwise, the chapters, again, are below. I'll start with mine quickly because I want to move swiftly onto yours, because mine's in a very simple style this week. I've seen a lot of these styles before where it's very flat and very kind of gradient use of color from back to front for just far buildings to closest buildings, and then building up some sort of silhouette scene. And then I had the idea, well, I actually had two palettes. I had the day one. So the actual tutorial has got two parts to it. We do the whole of the night scene, and then duplicate the group in the canvas, change the colors to the other version that comes in the palette as well. And then you have two versions, a day one and a nighttime one. But yeah, it initially started off with the day one, and I was using the hue slider just to drift through all the colors, and I saw it go to blue, and I was like, what if I turned on the brightness on this as well? And then it ended up getting fairly close to the night palette and going from there. I had good fun with this one in terms of just detailing buildings with just random, assortment of things that they would have, such as like aircon generators, satellites, cables. The second layer back, the building on the left-hand side with all the windows, as a fire escape running down the side, and just little things like that. It was quite fun, very simple. Again, I said this last week about creating tutorials that appeal to different sectors of our audience, whether it's beginners all the way through. And truth be told, I'll be brutally honest, the fact that we're so busy doing moving, etc., I didn't have the time to, dig deep into a large tutorial. But it's good that it actually still pays off views-wise as well, because I know there's still part of that audience that wants that type of content. So Definitely. All in all, I'm happy that it was sufficient for the audience for that week, if that makes sense. And I think the fact that there's two versions.
Yeah, I really like the fact that the location of the moon and the sun, it carries across. You have that sense that it is a moon and one, albeit like a really vibrant, glowy kind of moon. Quite stylized, but it works. It really is a nice sort of contrast between the kind of cold and the warm. You've got like fairy-like details there wrapped around the ironwork.
Yeah, so there's also like the lamp there of the fire escape, so the sort of overhanging light that lights up the back of her head as well. So we got in there, we might not be able to see it in the document that we review this in, but there's strokes in there just to accent the curls and flow of her hair and her shoulder and her back and so on. And then, fairy lights. So I wanted to make sure that the night version wasn't just a simple color change. It had certain elements that were, obviously stars, lighting, and so on, that were slightly different from the day version.
Definitely.
So, a bit of fairy lights and a very simple sort of downward light is sufficient for that type of thing. I think what's really cool with these ones is you could sit down with that silhouette at the foreground and just add so much content to it. You could add a cat there, or a dog, two people if you wanted to, either sitting down and having dinner as well. All these with a candle, there's so many different variations of the scene you could make and add more and more details. I added just a plant pot and some greenery around the left, and that was it.
How did you create the geometric shapes of the buildings? What was the fundamental process for that?
So at the back, the very furthest layer is simply just a selection tool, color filter, drag and create a rectangle. As we get closer, each building then starts to get a little bit more detailed. So it starts off with all of them starts off with a selection and then color fill, and then getting in there and creating either blocks for certain things. But I used a drawing guide as well. So making sure you could only draw horizontally or vertically. Vertically. Didn't sound right. And then creating all the boxes, drag and drop and color in. So just keeping it simple and using the assists as well to aid people through the process, and switching it off for certain things here and there. Other than that, I really want to move on to your tutorial, because when I saw it, it looks awesome. The beautiful bright glow from the windows on yours. In fact, I want to let you talk us through it. Go on, you talk us through your tutorial.
Well, it was actually aimed to be a shorter tutorial. It ended up looking more successful than I imagined it perhaps might do, considering it's a short one. I envisaged it being a relatively simple one. So, and it is in a sense, because the distant mountains, they don't even have any texture on. There's 2 layers of mountains there, distant, sort of, in the atmosphere, that are kind of fogged out. That apart from the cloud texture that has interrupted it, they're completely flat, really, apart from a gradient. But normally I would spend time in those distant mountains just adding fine little textures and things. But I just really wanted to be able to sort of move forward rapidly with the whole thing and just get straight to the kind of foreground details. So I've kept it relatively simple for the clouds and the sky, and the sort of tree textures, and then put all of the focus on the kind of foreground area. I really wanted to show that range of kind of to the coolest of because really it's only that one small section that really shows off the greens. And I really wanted to have the huts, the cabin, as a real popping kind of focal point, and then obviously the glow. I do tend to get a bit carried away with the glow in windows. It's hard not to. It becomes more about an aesthetic delight in the vibrancy and the kind of contrast of it than in real world. It looks like it's on fire, and people keep noting I don't always put chimneys on these things, but whatever. It's a work of art. If that is unsettling people, and maybe they've got a generator, maybe it's not a log fire, who knows. But yeah, I have been remiss. I hadn't put a chimney on it. So, that will be for the extended version. I'll perhaps add a chimney amongst other details. But it's amazing what people, point out to you, isn't it? It looks like it's on fire. It looks like it's got no chimney. Okay, whatever.
I love it. I think it looks great. I love the fact you put the sort of moss as well on the roof of it as well, just to really embed it in like the environment that it's in. It looks awesome. One thing that's really subtle that I really like is just to the right hand side of the roof, slightly higher up, about midpoint. I know what brush it is. We talk about it every week. There's a little bit of rainforest brush there, I believe, that's just giving like a little bit of green, but it's just subtle enough that like it either forms a tree or is just giving the illusion of it, but it blends it perfectly to that layer that it sits in behind, the forest in behind. And I think just nice graduation from focal and detail and sharpness to sort of obscure shapes that summarize a tree, if that makes sense.
I think in the shadows, especially in the gloomier parts where there's not going to be a lot of, real clear edges around anything, you can really get away with just being quite free and easy with something like the rainforest brush. I do try to lean into that as much as possible, and you're trying to create an entire image with enough of believability across the whole canvas. Then you've got to find ways that just shortcuts that enable you to put the focus and in the detail where you need it, and then just leave areas where it can be suggestive. And I found that really dark shadow behind structures or areas like that, it just needs a subtle suggestion, and it can go a long way.
Awesome. Well, I think there's so much there you can sort of envision in terms of like as the valley goes down, is there a river down there of some sort? It allows your imagination to fill out the rest of the scene, both below the hut and sort of round to the left hand side as well. It's awesome. And to be honest, I know what you're saying about people say about the glows. To me, that thought never comes into my mind. I don't know if someone who, watching your videos has had a traumatic experience in the past, but for me, they don't look like they're on fire. Sometimes I think there's an element, like you say, of just thinking it's a piece of art. It's not, you're not trying to create, structural designs for, architecture. It's just a bit of fun and a design. But the thing is, you could subtly say that there is a chimney, because if you look at the very middle of the roof on the opposite side, you could almost imagine that but there's a little bit of mist there, but that could arguably be smoke. You could argue that potentially there's a chimney on the opposite side. True. So there we go, full scene, fully flushed out, done. No extended version needed. What would you do in the extended version to this one?
I am considering little details like that. I'm trying to think what else I will do. I probably will go back into those mountains. I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to go back into those mountains and just flesh them out a little bit, give a bit more definition. Maybe do a foreground tree that's just a little bit different in character and a bit more detail on it. But it's difficult because the extended tutorials are always aimed to be extra things on top of what I've already done. But sometimes I kind of throw everything at the main tutorial, and then I have to really dig deep and think what can I do to refine it, apart from just applying it almost like a filter of higher definition or detail across the entire canvas. I'll try and do something probably with something else in the foreground, and then a bit more detail in the distant mountains. And I think that probably is sufficient to lift the image, I think.
When I look at the fact you say the word as well in your sort of the Patreon version that it's an extended version, my mind immediately runs to, why don't we make the canvas size bigger? Bring the for you, here I can imagine bringing it down a bit further. You could like you've done in previous tutorials where you blur things out in really close to camera or person. You could have whatever here on the right-hand side, trees or bushes or rocks even, and a pathway leading from
that is true
all the way down, kind of curving round towards us.
I might do that now.
Oh, there we go.
I'll credit you. Mate. I will. I'll tell my patrons that this is thanks to Joel.
Well, I tell him to come here because if anyone's watching, we are trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by Halloween. So if you're watching and you're enjoying the show, please subscribe to the show. It helps us out a great deal. And we really appreciate the support. And to be fair, the support's always amazing anyway. But if we can hit that target that we're aiming for, that'd be magic. I think we can move on to what is the main sort of topic for this show today, which we finally have an answer. We can finally stop hypothetical conversations that will probably have a few anyway. So. Yeah. Of will Procreate have AI in it?
Are we rolling? You've been asking us about AI. I usually don't like getting in front of the camera. I prefer that our products speak for themselves. I really fucking hate generative AI. I don't like what's happening in the industry, and I don't like what it's doing to artists. We're not going to be introducing any generative AI into our products. Our products are always designed and developed with the idea that a human will be creating something. We don't exactly know where this story is going to go or how it ends, but we believe that we're on the right path supporting human creativity.
Okay, so that was a pretty strongly worded statement and very short and sweet.
To the point, no messing there.
Yeah, very straight to the point. And I think in the space we're in at the minute and with everything going on, when people are too vague, it keeps the door slightly open.
True.
Whereas this has allowed him to make a statement and stick by it and probably not have to respond for quite some time until people probably, start to poke the fire a little bit more again in a little bit of time from now, which is probably in AI advancement, probably not that far away. Now, I know we've obviously covered AI a lot, but it is amazing to hear him come out and say exactly what he said, that they will not be integrating any generative AI into Procreate and that it is for artists to be creative. And we've said that from the start, to be fair, that it's about the craft of making the content. It's not about generative and, making shortcuts here and there. I mean, what did you think when you saw the video?
It was refreshing, wasn't it, to see someone, a CEO come out and be so upfront about something and there's no grey areas there. But I suppose that he did say generative AI. So Procreate won't encourage the creation of images using generative AI. But it doesn't mean that AI won't be included in there somehow. I mean, I guess I don't know what constitutes strictly AI and what doesn't. I mean, there's all sorts of technical tools in there that use a lot of complicated things. There might be some future where machine learning, if you see it that way, may be integrated into the app. But specifically, you said generative AI that creates the images using AI, which was a good point to really put, draw a line, put a dot on that. And it was good. It was reassuring. My thoughts on that also are that, well, they are in direct, not competition, but that I guess they're also under the same threat as artists, aren't they? Because they produce an app that artists use.
True.
They fundamentally need artists to be able to survive for their business model. And if the world turns to AI and artists no longer have a place, well, their app is no longer needed either.
True.
So they have a certain investment in artists thriving and artists doing well. But I believe that that comes from a deeper place other than just cynically they have to preserve their own financial interests. I think that anyone that's interested in the art world probably shares that sentiment. It's just really important to keep, what did you say, the human element. You know, it's all about what humans do, isn't it? The human creating process, rather than generative AI. And
I think as a business as well, it keeps them in their lane. It makes it very clear to their audience what their lane is as well, because you see Photoshop, for example, which you can use in a way to create a similar kind of content that we make of drawing with a stylus and etc., depending on your equipment. But they've obviously gone extremely heavy into AI and generative content that it blurs the line. Well, they're just very much open to the point where it's evolved to encompass all of it. You can create if you want to create, but also if you need a texture or you want to do something generative or expand a photo, you can do that. So I think it's very much kept them, as I said, in their lane, and it keeps a real focus on their sort of objective, which from a user point of view, people should be happy about, because you could only imagine that that's simply just going to make them focus even more on the tools that they have or want to introduce, rather than essentially messing around with generative stuff and seeing where that goes. You know, if they know they want to introduce a certain tool set or something like that into the app, I'd much rather that than anything else that, you know, AI could introduce into the app. You know, obviously we've had 3D models, etc., that we don't use ourselves, and there's also Dreams as well, which I haven't used in quite some time. But the thing is, though, Procreate, I think it's good that it can do those things, but it's not front and center. You know, it's like the 3D models are not in our faces. We don't have to use them all the time, and it's not part of even the UI to an extent. They've managed to integrate something like that. So if they move into another direction or something else, that'd be wicked. I'm very pleased, and I think the audience will be pleased as well. Let us know, by the way, in the comments what you thought of the clip as well, because it'd be very interesting to see what the audience think of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, Procreate is a painting and drawing app, isn't it? And I guess there's a difference between Procreate and, as you mentioned, Adobe Photoshop. Photoshop is used in all sorts of other scenarios, isn't it? So it's not just technically artists that would use it. It would be used in all sorts of visual creation, whether that's, you know, just designing product design or, you know, things to go in magazines, photographs. I mean, it's called Photoshop, isn't it, at the end of the day? You know, it's for predominantly in the earlier days to amend photos. And I guess Photoshop evolved and became so useful that you could, you know, use it with a Wacom graphics tablet and other things. And it became more than just a photo editing app. It became a place to paint and draw and do everything. Whereas they've really set their stall out from the beginning, really, as a painting and drawing app. I mean, that's fundamentally what it is. And they may have bolstered it with other things. They've added things to that. But at its heart, it is that. It started as a drawing thing experience for me. And it had a few extra things on it, but it didn't really stray very far from that. It required, you know, the only thing you could really do on it fundamentally was draw and paint, you know. And yes, you've been able to put in images but things like even like the clone tool was a later development. It wasn't there early on. So in the early days, if you put a photo in there and tried to edit it, it'd be very limited in what you could do. You could select certain areas, as I recall. I can't even recall, to be honest, how useful it was in terms of manipulating images. There must have been the facility to select areas and cut and paste and copy and paste and those kind of things. But there wasn't a clone tool, and there wasn't like a magic wand tool that there is in Procreate, like a lasso tool. Whereas there is those kind of things now, and it's gradually over time added more of the bells and whistles that you would get typically in Photoshop. But yeah, I mean, its bones, the skeleton of it, the bones of it are drawing and painting. And I suppose generative AI is fundamentally a kind of a threat to that process, isn't it? They don't want to steer away from, that physical connection that the user has. And it's a slippery slope, because if people start, producing Procreate documents, and it would have the Procreate file type, and they were presenting it, and it kind of muddies the waters, doesn't it, a lot then. If they're able to use generative AI in Procreate, then it pulls into question the authenticity of any digital art created at that point. Whereas now that they have drawn the line on that, we know that if it's a Procreate document, and there may be ways to get around this, I suppose, but if it's a Procreate document and you can see the history and you can see all the layers as a document and you can replay it, because I share my Procreate document to my patrons each week, so they can see how it's constructed. They can pick through all the different layers, and they can press the replay button to watch it. And I guess that, as long as they steer clear of that, then people are always going to be able to trust that a Procreate document is an authentic human-made thing, and then they can check the document and they can see for the truth of that. It's the proof of that, which is, apart from the hidden layers you can do to trace and things like that. But even then, I think even if you're tracing, it still requires a human being, to do the tracing and do it skillfully and integrate it into a full picture. So I think it's a bold statement to come out with, but I think it makes a lot of sense in terms of who they are, the DNA of the business, and where they're looking to project themselves in the future. Because we have said, and I'll wrap this up to a point and then sling it back to you. I think they have said that, or rather we've said, that authenticity is going to be something that's super valuable and sought after in the future. When all of the waters are kind of muddied in digital art and you don't know what's what, I think authenticity is going to be something that's really valued. I mean, do you know much about the Procreate documents and that side of it? Do you think, have you ever used the Procreate documents, to share that information with other people of what you've created? Do you think it's going to play a part?
Well, I've never done what you said there about sort of sharing your Procreate files. I've never really sort of considered it, to be honest. I'd have to work out sort of. I've just never really thought of it as an idea, to be honest. But to go back to your point about authenticity, I think that's the only. I think that again, it focuses it on the learning and the crafting, and I start to think a bit, and because we spoke about NFTs last week, about getting involved in the hype of things. I think at the minute there's a lot of people, and probably, I'll be honest, in my thought process is a lot of CEOs almost probably and shareholders saying, guys, what are we doing this AI? Because I'm not getting left behind. We've invested a lot of money. What are we doing to make sure that we are riding the wave that everybody else is? I want to be at the forefront of this. And, to an extent with like NFTs and crypto, that kind of stuff, a lot of companies do want to do that. And as we spoke about with NFTs last week, crash and burn. So I think it's a bold move from that point of view, which kind of also shows a little bit of kind of control that they still have over the app, regardless of potentially any investors. I have no idea if anyone's invested in it. A second, I guess, that Apple's involved to an extent, but I don't know. So I'm just speculating, but even if they had shareholders of some sort, they're very much still in control of the direction that the boat is going in, which is only a good thing, because sometimes you can steer it in a way that's simply for an exit plan that's 5 years from now, or even less than that, to sell the app to somebody else, or sell it to Apple, or sell it to Adobe, or whatever, and hope for a massive payout and a 10 times investment return. So I know I'm getting into the kind of stocks and shares of it, but sometimes that's what powers a lot of the stuff behind the scenes, is somebody tapping on your shoulder and saying, I gave you £10. What are you going to do with that? Because I want my £12 back next time we speak. You know, so I'm that's reassuring, as I said, and really, I think it's just interesting that they're not feeling the pressure.
Yeah.
And
do you think that will change?
It's hard,
though?
Isn't it?
Because if another company comes along and is willing to integrate AI or generative AI, so it's a creative app where you can manipulate images and you can do all the same kind of things. Say, for example, Ibis Paint is Ibis Paint, isn't it? Yeah. If they were, or Pro, I forget what it's called now, but if they came out and embraced it and they integrated it in a way that people could manipulate it themselves, but they could also use facets of AI in similar ways to perhaps we've speculated on, where they could create their own brush sets and things like that, using generative AI, not to create the overall image, but to create tools. Are they kind of, biting the, I don't know, shooting themselves in the foot by coming out with these kind of statements? If then in the future they feel that the business model has changed, I guess they're free to change their mind. But
let's take a look at Dreams then, for example, though, because they wanted to do something heavy with animation, and they could have easily steered that straight into Procreate, even in a new tab, but kept it in the app.
Yeah.
And I think Dreams says a lot about what their philosophy is, in the sense that if they were ever to do anything, and I know we've just watched a video all together, and I'll just make it clear, I do not think they'll ever do anything now generative. It's such a bold statement. It says it how it is. But we're just spitballing. We're just, talking hypotheticals. I think if they ever did, it would be a separate app, probably not even branded in any way Procreate, probably not even under the same developer account on the App Store, and under a completely different alias that is just completely separated, so that they can stick by that statement that Procreate won't have generative content in it based on AI. And to be honest, we spoke about this kind of loosely week after week in terms of AI. I'm starting, as we keep talking about it, I keep leaning closer towards the side of that with generative image curation. I don't see the point in it anymore. I'm starting to drift away from the thought of that it's a terror to the space and so on, because when you think about it, what's it used for? I mean, yes, in terms of business side of things, you can generate a pattern, put it on a bottle, sell it, cool, and you didn't have to do very much, and that's fair enough. But it's a low barrier to entry for a lot of people to jump on board with. But you still need the imagination, you still need the craft, you still need to be able to say, no, I want to adjust this, or even manually yourself, kind of thing. And I'm starting to think about it in the sense with the Apple playground that they're introducing with iOS 18, that it's just going to be used to just in chat with your friends and say, yeah, here's what cartoon version of you with 32 on your head in a birthday cake,
Will it ever be industry kind of professional standard used? Will it be used in Hollywood? Will it be used by concept designers? It may already be being used and not necessarily declare it as such. I suppose in that initial instance where they're just trying to come up with beginnings of ideas, then it plays a part. But then you can't bypass the need for people then to refine it and specify exactly how that could work. At this stage, maybe because the AI is getting more responsive, and it can kind of hold more conversations in mind. So it may be that it does the same with images. it does that with language at the current time. I think Chat GPT 4, you can have a really lengthy conversations, and it remembers the context of the entire conversation. It can relate to things you said many questions ago or sentences ago, and then relate it to the next one. So in that sense, would it be able to understand the whole image? And then you say, well, can you just make the path longer on that woodland scene? Can you make it narrower? Can you make the cottage bigger? It may be able to make those little refinements in the future. But I don't think it will be able to inject like a quality of, I don't know. I suppose everything's possible. I was going to say it can't put the same kind of quirky little brushstrokes and things that you might specifically want. It gets to the point where it would become so granular that it would be just easier to if you're at all able to understand the minutiae of what needs to be refined, then it's probably because you're capable of doing it yourself. I think most people that are not artists and look at an image will know that they like it, and they may even be able to appreciate aspects of why it's working or why it isn't. But I think it takes the artist to really understand every little element of it and why it's working in terms of the color contrast, in terms of the proportions, in terms of the textures, and the kind of handwriting of the artist, the signature of the artist's style. I think that it's going to be a while before it allows people to really manipulate things to that level. I think at the minute, I think it's just impressive that it can produce really cool images, but they do tend to have a certain style, don't they, an aesthetic.
Yeah. I just want to quickly go back to what I was saying, though, just to clarify the fact that I don't think it has any purpose or use anymore, in my opinion, as I've started to talk about it more. And I'm talking on behalf of a regular person. I am fully aware that being able to create a scene and then pass it on to a game director and say, this is what it could look like. I am fully aware that that really interrupts and disrupts that sector and industry and job space. The only reason I want to say that is I don't want people thinking that there's an ignorance to the fact that there are possibilities that people's jobs are at risk. I'm totally aware of that.
Got you.
I'm talking on behalf of the 95% of the population, if not more, that it's just regular people, i.e., our audience, because this obviously we make this show for our audience. So that's what I'm saying, is that I think for regular people who just use Procreate, who don't use it in a professional sense, there's no point to it. There's no purpose to it. I don't want to say point to it, or purpose to it, other than sending, again, a quick, you've got a 32 birthday hat on your head, on a cartoon version of yourself that you sent in iMessage, and it's gone and it's done. So
I think most people use Procreate because they like the process. Yeah, it's not to just 100%. Achieve the end result, is it? I think it is the process of drawing and painting, and it's the closest you can get to that without the traditional materials and carrying them around with you all the time. I think, and on that basis, it makes sense that it shouldn't integrate generative AI. If it just takes away from the joy and the process and the love of the craft, then I think it's a very good thing that they do steer their own ship well away from the choppy waters of AI.
I agree. Totally agree. And as I said at the very beginning, it's extremely reassuring. And from a longevity point of maybe flipping it to the content creator side of it for yourself and I and anybody else who watches this who also makes like tutorials in Procreate or anything else, it's quite reassuring from I guess like a job point of view, especially for yourself, doing this full time and whatnot. It's just great to know that the like as you say, the ship is still going in the same direction that we're all hoping it was going
definitely.
in. We're on path to where we should be going, and we're just staying. I mean, they're already there. Like, they're huge. It's one of the best experiences, both from a performance point of view, a features point of view, and sort of a low barrier to entry with anybody being able to grab an iPad, any type of stylus, your finger on your phone. Everybody has, well, not everybody, but majority of people have, a huge percentage of people have both those things, so they can at least get involved at the very lowest level and continue to make their way up to get better equipment and a greater experience as you go. Let's just quickly, because I feel like we've very easily covered that. I want to just talk to you about a topic that we spoke about quite a while ago, because when Apple announced that they had the new iPads that came out, you bought yourself a new one.
Yeah.
I think it might be quite interesting to hear what you think, one, of that iPad, and two, of the new Apple Pencil as well. Having had it now for a little while, like, is there? And to be honest, you might not even have any thoughts or feelings, but have you seen anything that stands out to you, whether it's performance or features or just experience of using it?
It's not greatly different. It tends
now,
to be
just before you carry on though, what iPad did you have before, just so everybody knows what you had before as a comparison?
You know, I have a very short-term memory. It was an M2. No, it wasn't. It was the M1. It was the M. It was the first M series iPad Pro, and obviously the Apple Pencil 2. And it's a 12.9, 256 gigabyte at the time. And now I've got the M4 512. 12.9. No, it's 13 inch now. It's 13. It's gone up by a 0.1 inch, which again obviously is not noticeable in terms of the size. It doesn't really do a lot that's different to me. I guess the screen is obviously brighter. And then what else is new? Well, I guess it runs different apps a bit more smoothly, a bit faster. For the editing, for me, for example, you know, I noticed that the LumaFusion just is a bit smoother. It doesn't slow down. I don't have to reset the app in order for it to kind of speed up again. Just subtle things like that. In terms of the Apple Pencil, it's pretty much the same experience. I don't use barrel roll. What else do I not do? I do use the squeeze occasionally, but not very much. I kind of forget it's there. And I like the haptic response. One thing it does when it's run low on battery is it does a little haptic,
cool,
little movement, little clicky thing, a little vibration when it's low on battery. So that's good. So you're not taken by surprise on that sense. I mean, you get a notification on the iPad anyway, but it definitely makes sure that you don't lose sight of the fact that the battery's almost at zero. It gives it like 20% and then at 10%, I think, I remember. But other than that, it's not radically different. I mean, I'm glad I've got it. It's future-proof. It may be that they start talking of AI, that Apple start introducing more of the AI features, and it may become relevant to have the those, the higher spec on the iPad, just to integrate some of the AI stuff. But I think if you've got an M1 or an M2, you're fine. Even if you haven't, if you've got an Air or you've got, a standard iPad, for things like Procreate, it doesn't make a lot of difference. I prefer the Apple Pencil 2 to the Apple Pencil 1. I think that is the biggest leap. If you can get an iPad with the Apple Pencil 2, then any of those iPads is going to be pretty good, really. Unless you're doing like really big apps that, you do editing and other things other than Procreate, really. For Procreate, I think pretty much any of the newer iPads will be absolutely fine. So, I'm glad I got it, but, that's because I do the channel, really. Fundamentally, it kind of is part of the business model, really, to keep up with the latest iPad. Just reviewing the Apple Pencil Pro and the Apple Pencil 2, I was able to create a video, and that gets clicks and generates a bit of money that pays for the Apple Pencil at least. So yeah, it's all good. There was another issue that I wanted to talk about potentially, just briefly. I noticed that on Patreon, Apple has added a charge for people if they're using the app, and us as creators have to authorize that we're going to allow Apple to do that, pretty much, or take the hit ourselves. Now, I've personally clicked that I want to add that, but I also want to just tell patrons, that people that are considering becoming a patron, don't use the app. Let's not just throw money at Apple. Go through a server, a browser, and it's a quick get around. It just strikes me as odd that Apple are now turning around and changing the rules on that.
So just to flush out what James is saying here, because this is what I have to deal with in my day job all the time, is if you buy something through an app that came from the App Store, not so much like an Amazon or anything like that, but if you're subscribing to something, let's just say Netflix, you download Netflix app, and you can't even do this anymore, but hypothetically, you download the Netflix app on your iPhone or iPad, and then you go to sign up to an account and you hit subscribe. Now, what happens is, because it uses Apple's subscription model and structure, Apple take 30% of the revenue from that. So let's just call it $10 to keep it simple. They'll take their $3 and leave Netflix with $7. But of course, Netflix, we're trying to charge you $10. So they're $3 out and 30% out.
Yeah. Just
because you downloaded the app, rather than go to the website where you can sign up on your laptop or even on your phone on the web. You can go to Netflix on your phone on Chrome or Safari, sign up to Netflix, and Apple won't get that 30%. Yeah. It's simply if you download an app, because the app feeds through into your App Store and your iCloud subscriptions. So Patreon this week gave creators such as yourself and I and everybody else the option: do we charge 30% more if somebody downloads
for
the
new patrons,
iOS
not existing
app?
Ones, yeah.
For new patrons, that's very true. So if you downloaded the iOS app of Patreon and you go to either one of ours and you try to subscribe, the creator would have had to make a decision. Does the creator lose, as I said, with the Netflix model, just keep it at $10? Do we lose $3 from ourselves, from our kind of profit, I guess, from that point of view? Or do we add 30% on?
Yeah.
And therefore Apple get their 30%, but we continue to get the same money we would have for each patron that joins. Yeah. It's a bit of we don't usually swear on the show, but it's a bit of a shitty situation to be put in, because the difference with me and you, and I know we're using an app like Patreon, but we're just individual people. We are the same people that are on the other end for everybody else, if that makes sense. You know, if we go to, Netflix, as I mentioned, that would affect us potentially. But I must admit, when I had to make the decision of which one to pick, it was really awful to have to sit there and think, well, do I take the hit, even though you're still creating the same content you're making, and now you're going to get less of it? And then Patreon take that. I know this is a real, specific sort of rant about something that doesn't affect a lot of people, but, it was a bit of a crapper to try and work out.
So I worked
what
on the
to
basis, in terms of my decision process, you don't have to tell yours, but it should be fairly obvious for new patrons, because it will be priced differently or not priced differently. I made the thought, or got to the thought, that if I take the hit, then people will just continue to not think it's an issue and just become patrons via the app. And people will increasingly do that because it's straightforward. You're already using Procreate on the tablet, and it will become an invisible reduction in what we generate and what people think that we're earning, through their support. Whereas at least now that they will realize that if they go through the app, they're getting charged extra, and they have the option then to go through the browser. So nobody needs to lose out. Whereas if we take the hit, I think it would become an invisible hit that people just wouldn't even think about too much. And I think at least choosing to put it onto the app expense for the patron, where they can avoid it. They don't need to have that extra 30%. They can just go straight to a browser and sidestep it. Whereas if we don't do it that way, then it automatically, and people won't know that we're taking the hit. It's not about greed. It's just, I just think it doesn't seem right that, we're put in this position. If we stay silent on it and just keep things running as usual, then we lose 30% of our earnings, which have been gifted to us from patrons in good faith. And, it would turn out that we're getting probably way less than half of what's been gifted, and support pledged by people. So at least this way, it highlights the problem to patrons, and they can then go ahead and sidestep the problem themselves, take the power into their own hands.
I've not made the decision yet. Just, to be honest, I've had too much to do as well. I just stepped away from it. But we don't have to make a decision for a little while. But the thing is, I think it's becoming quite, well, maybe it's not, but I think it's quite well known that, again, the apps like Netflix at one point they were charging more. I think even Disney Plus is the same. If you go through the certain avenues, you can have through the iOS app or iPad app, you are charged more, and to go to the web instead. I think Netflix in the end just actually ended up registering for Netflix on the app completely out.
Right.
And you can only log in now because the only way to then do it is on the website. So it's all fine and no one needs to worry about, well, why is it more expensive? I saw an advert and it was this price, you know?
Yes.
So, yeah. No. To be honest, I actually quite like that model. I'd quite like Patreon to turn around and say, no, you can't
Apple.
subscribe anymore through the iOS app. You must subscribe to this content creator through the web. Yeah, that maybe puts like a bit of a barrier in front of someone who goes, oh, I've got to go do this again or go do it on the web. But at the end of the day, like, it doesn't... They want the price that we've decided and wanted to set it as. Yeah. And therefore, it makes most sense that I'm happy with that as it is for the work that I'm doing and so on. And so, you know, we shouldn't have to... The price, for example, could be off-putting for somebody joining if it's got 30% more on it. So, there's a lot to it. It is a bit of a,
I shall be
bit of a tough
encouraging
one for creators.
Any new patrons to go do it on a browser.
Yes.
And whenever I'm promoting in the future, I shall be pointing people to do that. I think that's the best way forward. You know, I don't know why they've suddenly needed to change it. It's been going like this for years, and then I guess they just spot a pot of cash that they could put their greedy fingers into and grab at, you know, so I understand it. But
the thing is, though, in the EU, because obviously we're in the UK, there is new legislation, I can't talk today. Legal requirements for Apple. See, now you got... there's legal requirements of Apple in the EU now to allow subscriptions through loads of different models. You could subscribe to an app, but through like PayPal, for example, different payment options are allowed. So it's Patreon being mainly US. I don't know if they're just kind of applying a blanket decision across everything, or if they will make a slightly different version of the app for EU and so on, so that it can just be back to normal if you are here in the EU, etc. Outside of the States, basically, where Apple have got more requirements of them to be more open to certain things. So, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, though, because I was going to talk to you about it off air or even on air, either, because it's just one of those situations that pops up. But I think it's more of a customer awareness kind of thing, isn't it, for us to be saying, like, guys,
or, you know, lose money in this scenario.
Exactly.
It just needs a little bit of, you know, educating people so that they understand the difference and why it's there. Yeah.
And maybe if Patreon ever hear this, maybe they could tell us how many people have signed up through iOS to give us a gauge as to how many people actually do that, and will it be a drastic effect or not, or will it just be majority of people do it through the web? It's so interesting. Politics, really, of payments, and I want my cut, even though we didn't do anything, but whatever. Interesting. We covered a lot of topics in this one. The concept of just flowing one into the other. Yeah, definitely. But really good conversation as always, James. Thank you so much. Guys, if you're watching and you would like to support the show, as we said, the best thing you can do is subscribe to the show. It will help us reach our target of 1,000 by Halloween. So we're inching towards it every single week. We'll be back, of course, next week, every single Tuesday. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.